following announcement has been paid for by the New World Order.
What in the wide, wide world of sports is going on here?
It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for him.
Welcome to The Review with your hosts, John Nelson, John Wilkerson, John Wood, and Phil Cantor.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of The Review. It's the Online Sports Guys College Football Podcast, where we talk about everything going on in the great, big, wide, wonderful world of college football. Featuring us, the Online Sports Guys. With us, as usual, OSG J-Dub, OSG Nelson, Brother Wilkie.
Twitter banned Wilkie.
Twitter banned Wilkie.
Yes.
And me, OSG Phil. We are the Online Sports Guys at OSG Sports. And we talk every week for the rest of the season about what's going on in college football. And really, guys, I'm pretty sure we're going to probably have a single topic show today due to the, let's just say it was a bit of a large story that broke over the middle of the week when the Houston Chronicle reported that Oklahoma and Texas are looking to join the SEC. What was your reaction when you read that at first? I guess that's probably the best place to start.
Jaw
drop.
Boy, did that spark just like spread all over the country. I mean, that's not a wildfire. That was inferno. That was a nuclear blast.
Somebody dropped a bomb.
Yeah. Warmer dropped the big one.
Mm-hmm. Good thing I wasn't driving when Phil sent that text. That when we found out about it, I'm like, what? Yeah, and then all of a sudden my phone just blew up from every social media platform I was on with this ding, ding, ding Houston Chronicle stuff. So bully for the guy who broke the story, man.
Yeah, no kidding.
Good work.
It was kind of interesting for a number of more reasons that we're probably going to get into here over the course of the conversation. But the first weird, maybe a coincidence, maybe not a coincidence, it broke during the heart of SEC Media Days last week when it just so happened that Texas A&M Coach Jimbo Fisher was getting ready to address the assembled media. And just by coincidence,
timing's everything.
Just by coincidence, breaking somewhat of a tradition, Texas A&M Athletic Director Ross Bjork just happened to be there.
And he was like, 12th man's going to be ready. He finished it off, I thought, pretty well.
Well, actually, that wasn't his first reaction. The first reaction was, hell no.
The hell you say?
Well, we're all veterans of the SEC Media Days. We all attended it, and we all know strange things happen at that event. I was there when
Phil Fulmer got served.
Exactly.
Strange things are afoot at the Circle K.
Yeah. I was there when Nick Saban had his first SEC Media Day experience, standing on top of the elevator there at the old Winfrey Hotel. He's ascending up, and the horde following him. And a photographer friend of mine from WBRC just looks at me and goes, "Jesus has arrived." But this takes the cake.
How you doing?
Yeah, this kind of not only was it surprising, but as over the course of the last couple of days, little nuggets about this whole thing have been kind of leaking out, including notes like it isn't that much of a surprise, apparently, to the folks at Oklahoma, Texas, or Greg Sankey, because according to Kirk Bowles from the Austin American-Statesman, they've been the two parties have been talking for months.
Well, you ask it initially, well, your initial reaction was, and mine was a little bit of shock and awe and all that. But then I kind of when it settled down, I was like, it's been a done deal for a while, and that's just kind of how Texas and Oklahoma work when they work in tandem.
Yep.
And the SEC as the big dog. I mean, quoting Fred Dalton Thompson in The Hunt for Red October, Russians don't take a dump, son, without a plan.
Yeah.
And
I thought it was telling that there wasn't any denials.
No, nobody said. Oh
no,
no,
no one said
true.
no. No one said no. Nothing there. No, nothing to it. No, you didn't get any non-confirmation confirmations, but you didn't get any non-denial denials either.
Well, one question I do have, I'm gonna throw out to the group. Does the Big 12 have any recourse here to try to keep Texas and Oklahoma? What if they try to throw revenue sharing?
Here's what they tried to do, where they sat there and they tried to come up with a different economic model to try to for the benefit of Texas and Oklahoma to keep them in the Big 12-10. But you're not reading the room by trying to, it's like, okay, we want to keep Texas and Oklahoma, but the rest of you're just kind of over here a little bit.
Yeah, go to your corner.
Yeah, it's like, mom likes you best. I mean, that's the only way that I can describe what the Big 12-10 tried to do here. And it's like, dude, that's not going to work, and you're not actually letting the other folks in your conference understand that,
you said misreading the room.
Whew.
That doesn't even begin to describe it, because if it were just about something simple like that, we probably wouldn't be having this conversation.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, they could give all the revenues to Oklahoma and Texas, and I still think this is a done deal.
Yes.
There's no incentive for Oklahoma and Texas to stick around. This is too good to be true.
It's funny. I'm looking through the old football standings, and the highest Texas has been in the last 7 years was second place in the Big 12. That was in 2018. And
doesn't matter.
It's insane, but it's like Oklahoma's been the top dog in the Big 12 football-wise. And I don't know if this quote was even true, but it was a quote attributed to Jimbo Fisher that said, Texas is the fourth best team in their conference. Why do they want to come here? Because then he slid a dig into my Jayhawks. He said, there's no Kansas in the SEC. I'm like,
Vanderbilt.
Yeah, so true. But I just thought, it's nice to see the A&M shade already heading towards the Longhorns. He was like, you think the Downhorns are bad now? Just wait till you go to Death Valley.
They also have more money than God.
Well, yeah, there you go. You've got a lot of deep-pocketed people at Texas that want to be back on the main table. Unfortunately, Texas has followed the path of the school that's on Phil's chest right now. Great past, but cannot, hasn't adjusted to the new ways of doing things.
But they have won national championships before. Quite a few of the SEC teams have.
Who, Texas?
Yes.
Yeah, 3 that I know of.
Yep. I knew at least 2.
Yeah.
And
61, 63, and 04?
Yeah, outside of Alabama,
05,
Auburn, and LSU, we're not talking about in Florida, we're not talking about a whole lot of SEC teams winning national championships.
Yeah. And I did read a whole bunch
too. 69 they won.
Did read a whole bunch of on the Bulldogs, Georgia Bulldogs fan sites. They're not happy about Texas and Oklahoma coming in. So
your money won't be impacted. You won't play them until a title game unless they're part of your rivals section. When this goes 4x4 or 8x2, you won't play them until the end.
Now I have seen some, speaking of the 4x4 model, I've seen some circular firing squad type of SEC pairings. Like if you put Alabama, Auburn, Georgia, and Florida in the same division, that would be rough. And that would leave like Kentucky, Tennessee, South Carolina, and Vanderbilt in one. So I'm like, that's like the absolute opposite end of the scale.
I would.
Yeah,
that'd be an interesting pod.
Let's ask the soccer guy. Would that be like the group of death?
It would be the group of death. Legitimately, it would. Yeah, El Grupo de la Muerte, no question.
I'm just curious when the athletic directors and university presidents, when this all goes down, when Oklahoma and Texas join the league, what that's going to be like, because we all know that Alabama and Georgia and maybe Florida are kind of the big three that kind of direct the terms of engagement. And when Texas gets in there, they're used to getting their way unfettered with Oklahoma on its tail. And Oklahoma is, as Jada brought up, probably a better football program, a much better football program right now. But Oklahoma's smart enough to just kind of hang back and, give an opinion here and there. But they still have some juice.
Everything and then kicks ass.
Yeah, exactly. Texas is used to being unfettered in whatever they want. Ain't going to happen when they come and join the league, and that's going to be how they're going to react to that. I mean, there may be some big comeuppance for the Longhorns when that happens.
Well, first and foremost, I think the Longhorn Network will cease to exist because
I think it becomes a streaming network.
I think
by contract, it has to exist at least until 2031.
Oh, I'm sure that there will be until 2031. It'll be a part of that SEC Network Plus option or whatever. I think it'll roll over into those super extra channels that you get right now. But it will not be a broadcast network as we know it when Texas comes into the Southeastern Conference, which will probably end up being now just SEC for branding's sake. This is their Kentucky Fried Chicken KFC moment, I think, is what we're going to have here. It is, Longhorn Network, all the revenue from the Longhorn Network, they're going to have to figure out how that gets folded into the SEC, and so that'll boost revenues for all the schools and not just for Texas. Texas will not get its own revenue stream to the extent that it is right now, because the other partners in the SEC will not have their own networks. They believe in this corporate structure of the SEC network. They've got to figure out how to dissolve Longhorn and get it. Yeah.
They will, because what's going to end up happening is, now that with a 16-team SEC featuring those other two schools, you're talking about that ESPN deal that rolls into 2025. That's going to get renegotiated too.
Oh, no question.
More money.
Yeah.
And that money will offset whatever Texas probably is going to lose with their Longhorn Network revenue. So
exactly,
it balances out.
Yeah, and I saw a report. I think it was a CBS News, CBS Sports report about if, for some reason, I think it was a hypothetical, that if both Texas and Oklahoma tried to make a 2022 debut into the SEC, then each team would owe the Big 12 $80 million based on the rights for the TV rights contract that currently
they could do, but I don't think
they could do it. It wouldn't shock me if they did. I mean, I think combined, those two schools have a lot of juice, and they don't care about the other members of the Big 12. They're going to take care of their own interests and move on as soon as they can. What I think would be interesting, and this is kind of what, when you're looking for the genesis of this move and why is this happening and why it's happening now, I think part of it is last season in the SEC, when they played a conference-only schedule and their TV ratings were fantastic, and they became a mystery to everybody else because they weren't playing any non-cons. And the league went ahead and had a successful playoff run with a national championship. And I think one of the motivations is perhaps keeping that model for the foreseeable future, how much it benefited the SEC of just playing each other and being a mystery to everybody else, and great TV numbers for their partners, or maybe even playing one non-con game with their traditional rivals of Georgia Tech and South Carolina Clemson, maybe that model. But I think they want to become more insular from the rest of college football, because they can do it. I mean, it's like the NFL. They're going to get eyeballs all over the country.
But how much of that was from not having folks in the building to full capacity, though?
Yeah, and I had argued that last year when that came out, that the conference-only schedule was going to be a boon and something that they were going to like. And I think I agree 100% with Brother Wilkie that it makes perfect sense. If you've got if you've got 16 teams in the league, there's no real reason to play anything outside of maybe one rivalry game out of conference.
Now Alabama won't like that because they use those non-conference games to stack that record. But
Oh,
Well,
that's
that's what I
going to
say.
change
They
anyway.
may keep one non-con game for Alabama to play Louisiana Monroe. I mean, that may be
You sure you want to play
scenario.
Louisiana Monroe if you're Alabama?
But then, yeah, I'm just using that as an example. But then there's also, think about what rivalries they're going to have in their portfolio. I mean, now you got Texas, Oklahoma, which you guys know how I feel about that rivalry, and the Arkansas Texas rivalry is back. Texas A&M rivalry is back. I get 2 childhood rivalries back.
Oklahoma, Missouri.
Yeah, it's been pretty one-sided. And then you get the matchups of Alabama, Oklahoma, Texas, Florida. I mean, why do you need to play outside your conference? Why do you need to play a Big Ten or a Pac-12 or a ACC team when within your conference you've got compelling matchups every week?
Mm-hmm.
Well, we've talked about on this show several times about the realignment happening and the one shoe dropping and then going into the 4 super conferences in the country. Now that this shoe's dropped, what do you think? How will this affect, or do you think it had anything to do with at least the timing with the 12-team proposed playoff?
I think that was the motivation for that all along, because what it does for the SEC, it gives them the option of having 4, 5, maybe 6 teams in that 12-team playoff. I think Greg Sankey worked the room, to be honest with you, when it came to that, because he was one of the guys pushing that the hardest.
Yeah. So if and not putting this past anybody. So knowing that the negotiations allegedly with Texas and Oklahoma and the SEC were happening for months, then you have commissioner of the SEC sitting there and trumpeting an expanded playoff. Yeah, you wonder. It's like, okay, well, maybe we sit there and it's like, well, maybe we should have an expanded playoff. Off to the side, you're having these discussions with these 2 massive brands that you can add into your conference to bring you 16. And then once again, shockingly enough, that might get you more seats at the table.
Accounting guy, how much more money would we get with 5 or 6 teams in the playoff?
$100 billion.
How much money do we have when we just solidified the Dallas and Houston TV markets, and now we're adding San Antonio?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's huge for the SEC network. I mean, that they now would own the state of Texas, and they, get a couple of small markets in Oklahoma City and Tulsa that have never really been an SEC centric geographical area. So yeah.
And if I was Mark Emmert right now, based on what we talked about last week, I would be even more afraid now, because the NCAA is even more irrelevant now with these super conferences being.
I think that might be a reason why you heard him say that, because the handwriting's on the wall.
This is to me, this is CFA 2.0, and it is less of an impact of the NCAA and Mark Emmert than the first time that something like this happened. You are getting a situation where the NCAA is nothing more than an administrative body that wants to say things occasionally to try to better the sport. But when it comes to football, the brands and the businesses are taking over the impacts that the schools can have within the structure of football, which is the main economic engine for a lot of these institutions. I mean, short of March Madness, where the NCAA and college basketball and the networks, it's $1 billion thing.
Football.
But you're talking about, I mean, for me, you look at the number 1 sport in college athletics, pulling all of its control away from the NCAA and making sure that they're the brands and the conferences that are in charge of the discussion, and the NCAA is sitting there saying, you are not, you're not the guy in charge right now. The schools are the ones that are in charge right now. The athletes are getting advantages with NIL. The schools are getting advantages by coming together in all of this discussion. The NCAA is a distant partner in a lot of this right now.
And interesting. Go ahead, John. Sorry.
No, go ahead, Wilkie. Go ahead.
I was going to say it'd be interesting that you mentioned the coming together. When we had the 4 super conferences, they're going to band together. Tell the NCAA to go to your corner in the room, and shut your door while you're at it. I mean, I think that's an interesting part of this whole conversation. Is you got 4 separate leagues with 4 separate focuses, but the main thing is we don't want anything to do with a governing body that that half the time the leadership is clueless.
Yeah, that doesn't know how to govern, frankly.
Yeah.
Well, my thing is talking about not knowing how to govern. Look at Bob Bowlesby at the Big 12. What is he going to do?
Out of a job.
Yeah, I mean, literally, is the writing on the wall for him too? Can he do anything to hold this conference together?
Well, first of all, I imagine he had to change his underwear several times, middle of the week. Mm-hmm. Can you imagine when the news got to him? I don't know. There's not really anything they can do. There's no other alternatives.
No, this is done.
Unless he had a wild hair and decided to raid the ACC or some of the Pac-12 and see if he can get those guys to come join. I mean, that's about it. Nobody in the American wants to come that way because, it's a lateral move basically. And the American has said that we're going to be aggressive after these Big 12 schools and it may have better leadership right now than the Big 12.
The Big 12-10, Wilkie, is like when we were a lot younger and before we were all married and we would date someone and then you would hear that term GU. Well, I can't date that. I can't date her. I can't date him because he's GU. Geographically undesirable.
Yeah.
And that's what you're getting at right now with the Big 12-10 is they're geographically undesirable and they're becoming increasingly irrelevant as a platform because you have the Pac-12-14 out west taking up the Pacific time zone and a lot of the mountain. Yep. You've got the SEC and the ACC that have taken up everything south of the Mason-Dixon line and are working their way up into the Northeast.
Yep.
And then you have the
Big Ten,
the Big 10, 12-14 that have taken up the rest of that landscape
from Midwest,
from basically DC all the way to Minnesota. The Big 12-10 has made itself irrelevant and it's being squeezed out by all of these 4 other conferences that are going into their footprints. And I think it's going to be the biggest test for these administrations that are currently in the conference to do what's best for them and figure out where to go, because that to me is the next step in all of this. All of these partners, and you mentioned the American. The American has been the top Go 5 that we've been discussing when it comes to getting into the playoffs and what have you. Absolutely. The American is very, very smart and sitting here saying, hey, look, we want you to be a part of us. The American is being proactive in this discussion to try to sit there and still be that 5th conference, even if the Big 12-10 is pretty much dissolving in front of our eyes.
Let's get a little bit more into that here when we hit the second half of the show, because we kind of covered a lot of ground and some topics I wanted to hit in the second half. When we come back, folks, in the second half of the show, we're going to talk about what this all means to some individual schools, some of the conferences, and really what you're going to see college football look like in probably less than 2 to 3 years from now. It's probably not going to look anything like it does today. That and more when we come back for the second half of the review. You are listening to the review on the OSG Sports Podcasting Network.
The OSG app is up and running on your Android or iPhone. Install the OSG app and listen to our podcast from college football, soccer, and lacrosse. What are you waiting for? Download the OSG app today.
If you've been hurt in a car wreck, contact my friend Steve Apolinski of Apolinski & Associates. He's been representing individuals for over 30 years throughout Georgia and Alabama. Email him at steve@aa-legal.com or call him 24/7 at 404-377-9191. The initial consultation is free.
We know that every driver is different, and a one-size policy does not fit all. That's why Country Financial offers a variety of discounts, so you get the coverage you need and the savings you deserve. From good driver to good student, multi-policy to multi-car, we've got a discount to suit every driver. Call Jason Wright at 678-568-6871 today to see what you could save. On Facebook at Jason Wright Agency or by phone at 678-568-6871. Discounts vary by state. Policies issued by Country Mutual Insurance Company, Country Preferred Insurance Company, or Country Casualty Insurance Company, Bloomington, Illinois.
We mock what we don't understand.
Yeah.
Congratulations, you have made it to the second half of the show. Halftime is over. We're getting into the home stretch here on The Review. It's the OSG Sports College Football Podcast.
Take two.
Pack the cat.
Featuring us, the online sports guys. OSG Nelson, OSG J-Dub, In Search of Twitter Wilkie, and OSG Phil.
He ain't in search of Twitter. Twitter's blocked him. he can search all he wants. Twitter's like, nah, fam.
It's like, where's Twitter?
God,
I don't see Twitter.
God knows why.
Resolved.
It ain't happening.
And this week, guys, we've been talking the first half of the show about galactic change in the world of college football with the announcement of Oklahoma and Texas within weeks possibly landing in the SEC. Game changer, to say the least. It means a lot of things for a lot of schools and a lot of people. What do you do if you're Kansas, as we look at J-Dub's t-shirt, or Baylor, or Texas Christian, or Oklahoma State even? What are your options? Where do you go from here?
Well, Oklahoma State, let's start with them. Don't be surprised if some of the power brokers there go to the state legislator and see what moves they can do to block Oklahoma from leaving for the SEC. They're going to take every legal. Well, they're more tight into Oklahoma, and they've always worked together. At least that's, I read one of Barry Trammell's columns this morning about their history of working together and feeling betrayed by that now. So
I'm 40.
Exactly. I can see OSU doing that to find any road they can with the state legislature in Oklahoma to block that. Whether it's withholding funding or whatever. Now, there's some power brokers at OSU, too, that are as powerful as some of the ones at OU. So, to me, that having covered both programs years ago and knowing the inner workings of both, I can see that happening. But I think Oklahoma State will be the most attractive piece for when the Big 12 breaks up. And, will they go Pac-12? That seems to be the natural place for them to land. But for some reason, it wouldn't shock me if they went American.
Yeah.
If the American becomes that fifth league that we all kind of anticipate them being, I'm sure we'll talk about that a little later.
Well, I saw a report in The Athletic yesterday that said Oklahoma State is their number one target.
They should be. Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
It should be.
So
it's a natural fit against, and I think TCU should be there on their short list as well. It'd be kind of going back to the future for them.
Oh, and Baylor.
And Baylor, too. You keep that triumphant together. There's some history between.
You've already got Houston that's in the ACC.
Yeah. And they're attractive pieces, and those schools are not just for football, for all sports, are going to make the American much better. Kansas, Iowa State, they're naturals for the Big Ten. I think they've already had discussions with the Big Ten of some kind.
There's rumor that a call has been set up already, but I haven't heard proof of that.
Right, and there's been some traffic in the Kansas and Iowa newspapers. Yep. I think the Des Moines Register had something about Iowa State lobbying for that type of move should the Big 12 break up, which is inevitable.
I'm joking on our text chain, but if I'm the Big Ten, I'm asking if can I have Kansas's basketball program and let somebody else take their football team?
Hey, now.
Yeah, I think it's going to be an all or nothing. I mean,
Cyhawks a conference game.
Yeah. That's what I was thinking. As I was told you earlier, I love the fact of Iowa State going to the Big Ten and puts the Cyhawk as a conference game. That just makes me so excited.
You know, the two programs I think are going to struggle are Texas Tech and Kansas State. Texas Tech probably would be earmarked for the Pac-12 if they decide to expand.
Yeah.
But they need a dance partner, and the Pac-12 I think have made some inquiries about BYU and about Boise State and, as possibilities. So maybe this is the push to get one of those schools to come into the league with Texas Tech. But the Mountain West might be the better landing spot for Texas Tech. And that would be, for Texas Tech, I'm sure that's a downgrade. But I mean, it's Lubbock, Texas, and
it's in the middle.
Tom Tuberville said it's
middle of nowhere.
Yeah, exactly. I've been there, and I remember Tom Tuberville describing it as Baghdad.
That went over well, I'm sure.
Yeah, well, I remember flying in there to work a game too, and just thinking, "Oh my God, there's nothing here," and then all of a sudden, poof, there's the town.
Yeah, exactly. It's a lonely outpost.
And you look up and down the roster of the Mountain West. I mean, one of those Big 12 schools could be walk in and become a marquee school.
Yeah.
In that conference.
Yeah. Could absolutely win that conference almost every single year. At least be the top one of the top contenders to win the conference every year.
At least initially, but the level of athlete that Texas Tech's been getting because they're in the Big 12.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's going to continue if they move to the Mountain West. Like
True.
A lot of those kids that they get are going to go to a Texas SEC or Texas A&M or an Oklahoma State. But the one program that really has got limited options, and that's Kansas State.
Yeah, they're caught
there's
between a hard place.
There's no big TV market tied into them. It's not a very large university. They've kind of gone down a little bit in the football program, even though we love Chris Kleiman. And they're just not attractive to any of the top four conferences. I don't see them being able to get into the Pac-12. I don't think the Big Ten would take them.
I mean, you look at even their rivalry game, the Sunflower Showdown is not a ratings thing. The only people that care about the Sunflower Showdown live in the state of Kansas.
Yeah.
And if I can see K-State moving into the Missouri Valley, to be perfectly
dropping to 1AA,
the FCS. I think Mountain West would probably be a good landing spot for them too. Yeah. It might be the more feasible one. But that's a program that's between a rock and a hard place. There's just nothing attractive about Kansas State as far as joining a league. And I don't know if you guys been to Manhattan, but there's not much there either.
That's what I was going to say. That's why Manhattan's kind of I say this as a team who hasn't won a conference game in 3 years. I don't like K-State's football program, but their but I'm like, that's what I'm saying. Go 1AA, go out of the way, kind of clear the way for Kansas. But
if they go 1AA, Kansas, I have to go Division II in football.
Wow,
ouch. But that being said, I do agree. Mountain West, and then the color scheme is already purple and silver, so I mean that would already fit in with K-State.
We haven't really touched on this too much. We've talked mostly about the fallout with the Big 12, a little bit with the AAC. But what we haven't hit on is what does the ACC do? Because all of a sudden you've got big, mighty SEC on one end, big, mighty Big 10 with Ohio State and Michigan and Penn State breathing down your neck on the other end.
Just lock in Notre Dame.
ACC with Clemson and not really a whole lot of other people.
Lock in Notre Dame. I think Wilkie's the biggest thing.
Yeah, I agree. Lock in Notre Dame, but I saw a quote from Jack Swarbrick saying that they're not going to change their plans. I mean, yeah, they got made the ACC title game. They're only year in, but they still like independent status. So that's going to be a really tough sell for Jim Phillips as he begins his tenure as ACC commissioner.
But how does Swarbrick sell that in a world where every single other power school is in one conference or another, and then they're out there by themselves?
Well, he's got a television network back.
They're Notre Dame and
He does, but who do
NBC.
they play?
Yeah.
Oh, believe me, they'll play somebody because everybody wants to play Notre Dame. Yeah,
Well,
they'll have
well-
no problem scheduling.
Well, if you think about it, if they bring in Notre Dame permanently for the whole shebang, not just football, that's 15 teams, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Do you bring in a West Virginia? Do you bring in a Cincinnati? Do you bring in somebody like that to make it a conference
Yeah.
of 16?
I keep forgetting West Virginia's in the Big 12 sometimes because
know.
it's not really a great fit, right?
Yeah.
Geographically unavailable. Unattractive.
Yeah, I mean, ACC would be a perfect landing spot for West Virginia. You revive the backyard brawl. You renew the rivalry with Virginia Tech. I don't think a lot of people realize that's a big rivalry, Virginia Tech and West Virginia. Those two schools do not like each other at all.
Far away from each other.
No, so that would be a good thing for the ACC. I tend to like Cincinnati because you get the Ohio television market.
Yep.
You get the Cincinnati, Cleveland, Columbus TV markets, and I think it's a better fit. It'll be a good natural rivalry for Louisville.
Would pull anything outside of Cincinnati though, because once you get an hour north of Cincinnati, you're talking Ohio State territory, pretty much the rest of the state.
And geographically, West Virginia is the better play.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that if you can bring in West Virginia, that gets you to 15, and then you keep that 16th space open for Notre Dame whenever Jack Swarbrick or whoever a new AD decides that they need to. Yes, exactly. That is exactly right.
Rosie and Maggie say hello.
Continue to talk. I'm going to go find out what my dogs are barking at.
Well, no, but I think that
They want West Virginia to join the ACC.
Exactly. That's what they were talking about. West Virginia to join the ACC, and I think that the notion is here: if you can bring West Virginia back in close, and draw them in, you leave that 16th spot open for Notre Dame whenever Notre Dame decides that okay, we don't want to be an independent anymore, or we can keep our NBC deal and do whatever independently of the ACC network. Then I think that. That's the play for me. Is you bring West Virginia back in and then leave that 16th spot open.
Kind of a hot take that may or may not be popular with the three of you. Do you go back after Maryland?
Probably with Phillips as Jim Phillips as the commissioner, that could be a possible play.
Talking about reuniting some old rivalries. Maryland was weren't they close to one of the original founders of the ACC?
Financially, how would Maryland pull that off, though? They're already deep in debt just from making the move out of the ACC to the Big Ten. They would have to buy their way back out of the Big Ten to go to the ACC. And you're talking about just adding multiple layers of debt.
Yeah, and that's the thing for me is could Maryland afford it? But I still think that if you bring West Virginia back in, it's a cheaper alternative.
Agreed.
And then you reintroduce the rivalries in that section of the country, but leave 16 open for Notre Dame.
Yeah, because that would be it. Because you bring in West Virginia, that would be the 15th locked team, and sometime Notre Dame's going to have to get off the fence.
That was kind of where I was going to go next. And I know Wilkie had said Notre Dame's Notre Dame, and everybody's going to want to come play them. But if you're in a new world order here where you've got a 16-team SEC, a 16-team Big Ten, a 16-team Pac-12, and a 15 or 16-team ACC, who are they going to play? I mean, because you're talking about conferences that are going to have to play almost entirely conference schedules in order to get through their season with all these teams. You're talking about one opening in each of these teams, because we talked about that a little bit in the first block of the show. Notre Dame was going to be boxed in at that point, I think. Tradition is great. The history is great. Having NBC backing you is great. But it doesn't matter if the only thing you can do is play Army and Navy and Air Force every year.
Well, first of all, they're locked in to play 5 ACC schools a year.
Which is why I think they're going to get their hand forced.
So that's part of it. They have long-standing contracts with Southern Cal, which still has a long way to go, and that's not going to go anywhere. They always play Michigan State. These are schools that understand the Notre Dame brand and what it brings. to their stadiums when they host them, and to their and the networks love it too, because look, that's a national following, and they know that the number is going to be increased when Notre Dame is on their network playing one of their conference schools.
But
so
that's the old system.
I still think it's going to happen in the new system, because yes, Notre Dame has that kind of clout. They are the New York Yankees, the Dallas Cowboys, the team that everybody hates in or likes in college football, as with the other sports. They're that program that you either love them or hate them, and they're always going to get eyes on the screens when you see those golden helmets. So I think they're arrogant enough to keep being independent status, and they'll make it work. And I think they can make it work.
Well, we've talked a lot on this show about TV contracts, at least with this particular topic. Notre Dame has a huge television contract with NBC Sports, if I'm not badly mistaken.
Yep.
If they go to the ACC, won't that affect that contract?
Yes,
It would have to.
So that's money out of their pocket, and reason to agree with Wilkie and say, yeah, I don't want to do that.
But is Notre Dame if you're playing the military schools, BYU,
right now, yes,
all
still
these independent schools,
they are still Notre Dame.
USC's not going to be able to afford that extra out-of-conference rivalry game if there's a 16-team Pac-12. Or
USC would much rather play Notre Dame and keep that going than playing Oregon State or a Washington State. I'm sure Notre Dame's like third in their pecking order behind UCLA, to be honest with you. And it's also, look, it's a chance for Southern Cal to be noticed nationally. I mean, if they keep playing the Pac-12 schools right now, they don't get to play nationally simply because of the time zone. And so many people in the Eastern time zone that kind of influence voting for these national awards, the Heisman. Southern Cal is going to try to play as many Eastern teams as they can under this new world order. And Notre Dame is not going to go anywhere. They're going to stay on that schedule because of that. So unless they play more 9 a.m. games, and I don't think that's going to happen much, because, I don't think people like that back there. So don't worry. I think Notre Dame still will always have the juice right now to be that lone independent. Even if they play the service academies, even if they play Army, Navy, and Air Force, they're still going to garner a huge number, or acceptable number at least, for NBC to recoup whatever ad revenue they're getting off of that, and in return giving it to Notre Dame for their athletic program. They've got the best case scenario.
I can tell you this much: when I was getting recruited by the Naval Academy, one of the first things that one of the coaches told me said, you get to play the Army-Navy game. You get to play Notre Dame. Notre Dame was the second team. This was 1991, the second team that they mentioned as far as this is the type of games you'll play coming to the Naval Academy. So I kind of agree with Wilkie here. I think Notre Dame's going to be that arrogant, that team, because if you think about putting a 4x4 schedule together in these big, huge super divisions, there's got to be a way to do it. Like maybe you don't play everybody every year, and then add in some of those big non-con games so that the SC still plays Notre Dame or that kind of thing. I mean, there's got to be a scheduling way to make that work, because I don't think they're going to give that up.
If I'm a conference making $1 billion a year, why am I going to go out of my way to bend my schedule in order to accommodate Notre Dame? We hit peak Notre Dame 10, 15 years ago. They're
Notre
not the
Dame,
same program they
to
were
the point that Wilkie made. Notre Dame is the Yankees of college football, regardless of if they're winning or losing or their win-loss record. People who like Notre Dame will watch Notre Dame play because they like Notre Dame. People who are fans of the other teams or the casual college football fan who'll be ducking in the door want to see Notre Dame lose to these other teams, because they're Notre Dame.
2005 or Notre Dame of 2021?
I'm talking about Notre Dame right now. I mean, when Notre Dame played Clemson.
That's what I was going to say, yeah.
When Notre Dame played Clemson, as an example, there were more folks who watched that were casuals because they wanted to see this critical mass game between Dabo Swinney and Notre Dame and Brian Kelly, two lightning rods in college football. And so you got that critical mass with those two schools. You still get that same kind of lightning rod with Notre Dame, regardless of what you think about them and your attachment. There's still that presence. I mean, the Yankees this year in Major League Baseball suck, but people still watch the New York Yankees.
I'm surprised you haven't heard my son scream because Torres. Herman had a no-hitter going in the 8th inning, lost on a base hit, and then the Red Sox scored 5 runs in that inning to take the lead. I guess they won the game. When you hear this, you'll know. But let me get back to focused here.
I'll throw this out again to the three of you guys. Is Notre Dame on that same level as Alabama?
Yes.
Georgia?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, they always will be. They always will be. Yeah. That golden helmet, to John's point, to the casual fan out there, when they see those golden helmets, they're going to lock on. The other example that, John, you brought up Clemson, the Georgia game when they played at Notre Dame Stadium. I mean, that drew a huge number for NBC, and it was anticipated from day one of the season.
They're the Dallas Cowboys.
And we got the game we expected. What's that?
They're the Dallas Cowboys of college football.
No question.
Yep.
Exactly. They are the villain, I guess.
Yeah.
And the hero at the same time.
Yeah, they're the heel. They are the absolute heel. And by the way, the Red Sox did win 5-4.
I may be wrong, maybe alone on my horse here, but I still don't buy that they're going to be the impact player that they've been in the years past when this all changes. I'm going to stick to that one, and we'll see how it plays out. Guys, where I see this going within the next 3 to 4 years is something that we've hit on a few times here over the course of the last several episodes that we've done on the show. Are we looking at a potential breakaway here with 60, 65 teams from these power conferences playing against each other and against each other only, and then the group of 5 going to have their own level of competition?
And they should.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, I think if the American is aggressive as they say they're going to be, I think the Power 5 remains, and we have a group of 4. Because I know it's going to be a tough road to hoe for the American, but to me, they've earned it. They've done everything you need to do to join that club. And if they're going to bring in an Oklahoma State, a TCU, a Texas,
Baylor,
well, maybe Baylor, maybe Texas Tech.
But I'll throw this out there based on what we just talked about. Are they the eyeball draws, the teams that are in the ACC, that the other conferences have? Or
I think UCF is. I think UCF just made themselves into a brand in college football, and bringing Gus Malzahn in to be their head coach. That's a name out there that you can market.
One way to phrase it, yeah.
Well, I mean, he has a system, he has a style, and if he's successful there, then that brand remains. So, I think Cincinnati helped its brand with its, and Luke Fickell has become a well-respected head coach throughout college football circles. So you've really got 2 programs there that have kind of built a national brand. And then you bring those other schools in from the Big 12. I think it's possible because the American, they've had a few primetime games on ESPN ABC, and I think the numbers have been pretty good. So I can see it being remaining in the Power 5 because they've pushed that hard for their brand, and we have a group of 4 that'll battle out for their own national championship.
Well, we've danced around this completely and hadn't really talked about it at all. The Pac-12 have a new commissioner. George Klavkov's out there. Just started his job on July 1st. How aggressive should they be? Should they go? Because right now there's 12 teams in the Pac-12. Should they go out and get a Texas Tech, a Baylor, K-State, OSU?
Oh, yeah.
Should they be the rest too?
But who, as the lowest ranked Power 5 conference, who would want to go be a part of the Pac-12 right now, considering that they're number 5 of the 5, and they're only going to be number 4 of the 4 because we think that the Big 12-10 is going to dissolve. They're still going to be the last ranked power conference of all the power conferences. Why should I go be?
Because you have no other option.
but who are we talking about here? I mean, you're looking out for what's best for you. Is the Pac-12 the best option for Texas Tech?
It could be.
Could be if you think about the teams you could play. You could play like a Oregon or a Stanford or those types of versus.
They're a lot closer to Arizona, somebody like an Arizona or an Arizona State than some of the other programs in that conference.
Or is it best for right now? The conference I have in mind has 11 teams. If they bring in 3 from a particular state, that puts them at 14. If you bring in TCU, if you bring in Baylor, if you bring in Texas Tech to the American, you pair them off with SMU and Houston, and basically you're almost recreating like the American West is almost like the old Southwest Conference here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I see that.
I know that conference well.
Yeah. So and you would get the American to 14 teams right there. You'd still be geographically desirable, because 5 of your 14 would be in the state of Texas, which would get you secondary TV markets and still get you Texas presence. But, I'm thinking, should Texas Tech really go to the Pac-12, considering current dynamic and all that kind of stuff?
There's definitely a scenario where the Pac-12 gets left hung high and dry here.
Well, the new commissioner of the Pac-12 is a media guy. And my guess, he's probably a little bit over his head on this.
Yeah.
But if he values TV markets and they want the Pac-12 network to be something, then he needs to be aggressive to get those Texas schools, because they need to deliver the Dallas, Fort Worth, and the Houston TV markets. And maybe that'll, I doubt if it will, but maybe it'll give some kind of impetus into the Pac-12 network, which has just been a financial drain and that nobody watches. But
I will say this: if the American can pull away, you're talking about if I can get Texas Tech and Baylor out of the Big 12, K-State and OSU will probably be like, yeah, I don't want to be stuck here holding the bag by myself and nowhere else to go.
Well, but then I think OSU, yeah, and that's the thing is, I mean, I could see, OSU to me right now is the belle of the ball, and if you bring in TCU, you bring in Baylor, you bring in Texas Tech, then if, like I said, that gets you to 14. What does Oklahoma State do? That to me is that's the key here in all of this. And I think that Oklahoma State, they might be able to dictate their own terms. Yeah, I think that there's definitely some negotiating that could be done by Oklahoma State out here, because I think that they're one of the shinier objects that's left over in all of this.
Yeah, I think the conclusion we're kind of coming to here is we're looking at a potential all-out war here between the Pac-12 and the AAC over the scraps of the Big 12.
Yep, Big 12 is essentially done. Big 12, 10. As soon as Texas and Oklahoma go to the SEC, there's nothing left of the Big 12.
Yeah, bye.
It'll just be the ticking clock.
Bob Bowlesby will be looking. Well, he'll be. Will he still be on the CFP committee? Will that be left on his resume?
Oof. That seat might go away.
Yeah, so many dilemmas.
I just don't see the conference surviving in any way, shape, or form.
Oh no!
Once this happens,
no, I don't.
No, it was barely viable before this. Yep. And
let's see what this week brings.
Yeah, that's true.
And we haven't even really talked about some of the basketball implications of some of these shifts over. I mean, that's going to be big as well.
Indeed, but that's another conversation for another day, guys. What do you say we wrap things up here for this episode?
Let's wrap things up for this episode.
We've got plenty more to talk about this, and just getting into the whole optics and the competitiveness of a potential SEC with Oklahoma and Texas, and that could probably be a show unto itself. But that's for later episodes. In the meantime, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for sticking around. You have been listening to The Review. We are available in multiple places. You can download our app on your phone, OSG Sports. It's got all of our content, not only college football, but soccer, through our folks at Soccer Down Here. Download the app now. It's free in the Google Play Store and in the Apple Store. You can find us on social media. I've already told you where our Twitter handles are. Well,
except for one of us.
Wilkie's Twitter handle.
One of us.
But you can also find us on Facebook at OSG Sports. The team Facebook or the team Twitter page is also at OSG Sports. If you're watching this, chances are you found our YouTube channel, which is again at OSG Sports. So, for the rest of the Online Sports Guys, I am OSG Phil. We are the Online Sports Guys. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. We will catch you again next week. Have a good one. Bye-bye.